I think it's sometimes easiest for kids to see their role when they're taking a test. But in fact, it's important that they understand that the purpose of taking the test is to recall the information that they've previously learned and then retained. So essentially what we're saying here is that students have an important role to play. And if they don't realize that, then we're in a position where they're less likely to do the things they need to do to be successful. If you don't even realize that you have a role to play, you're not going to take the steps to engage in that process, to receive the information, to keep it organized in your brain, to hold on to it, and then to show what you know through an assessment. This is where mindset really comes in, and Chelsea will talk more about this. But basically, just the mindset helps kids be open to that process.
Thank you, Sarah. So as you can see here, we kind of have a little infographic going on here, and we want kids to know that SMART is a journey. Because their education is something they need to take an active role in, again, it's not just something that's happening to them. We want to encourage the idea that SMART is a journey, not a destination. And the fuel for that journey is the effort they put in, right? And so it's how much work they're willing to put into their learning, not so much what their innate talent or inability is. So again, this is where growth mindset comes in, and it's the idea, growth mindset itself is the idea that growing abilities or talents takes efforts and can be worked at versus just a characteristic and not something that you can change. So that's really what we want to build here, is kind of that idea that you can grow yourself. As you can see, it's not a linear journey, right? There's going to be a lot of bumps and hills and valleys that we go through. And there's going to be times when they know something and then they don't know something, and then they have to learn it and master it, and they're at a threshold of knowing it, and then they're presented with new information and they have to learn more things. An example of this in the education world is math, right? Most kids feel pretty confident in math up until about a certain age, and there's some research on this. Usually about second or third grade, kids find that math becomes more challenging. It doesn't feel as easy to do anymore. So a student that feels like they have a growth mindset in math feels like they're up to the challenge. They feel like they can learn strategies to master the skill, and they don't feel stuck when they're presented with new information that's challenging at first, right? Because all new information is challenging. We typically don't do things perfect the first time, right? It takes work. But some kids really feel stuck when they're presented, especially if they felt like, oh man, math has been easy so far. All of a sudden, it's not easy anymore, right? What's wrong with me? What happened, right? A growth mindset says, nothing's wrong with me. I just need to learn it and learn the strategies to make this easier. Another example out of kind of in the athletic world, right, is if you think of a athlete like Michael Phelps, right? We all know who Michael Phelps is. He does have an incredible amount of talent, right? Nobody's doubting that. And probably some biological advantages that support him in being a top competitor, right? But that really only takes them about 25% of the way. Him and other great athletes, and really anybody that's successful will tell you, it's all about the effort that they put in to get their talent and reach their full potential, right? Because your innate talent's only going to take you so far, right? To really reach your full potential, you're going to have to put that effort and work in. And having a growth mindset means, I know I can do this. I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to fail sometimes, right? What is that information going to tell me, and how can I do better? So if you see on the next slide, this is what you might see or observe or hear from a student who may have a fixed mindset, right? This is the opposite of a growth mindset, where you believe that your potential is given to you at birth and there's nothing you can do about it, right? Whether you're good at something, whether you're not good at something, that's just who I am, right? They may ignore feedback or criticism, right? Or blame it on like external factors. They may say, I don't want to look like I failed, So they're going to avoid challenges, or they're not going to try new things. They may say, I can't a lot. Or as soon as they're faced with a challenge, they give up really quickly. Those are some things you might see in here. Or you may have teachers sharing with you, I've noticed that. And they may share some of these things if, somebody has a fixed mindset about something. And on the next slide, so what that means again is that what they feel like often is, I am defined by being smart, right? And smart is a threshold. And so if there's something that they don't feel smart in, they don't do that, right? Because they want to keep feeling smart. They don't feel like, they feel like, okay, this is where I'm at, and I can't get better or worse at this thing. I'm not good at this thing, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with the thing I know, right? To continue looking smart, right? They feel it's a destination, not a journey. So again, they're really going to avoid those challenges. They're going to think, feedback, why am I getting feedback? It can't help me because I can't get better at this thing, or it's not going to help me because I'm never going to be good at that. So why would I listen to that feedback, right? And they can sometimes also be threatened by other successes. So if they feel that other people are successful, they may attribute those things to external things, and maybe some of their failures or successes they're attributing to internal things. On the next slide, though, this is where a growth mindset comes in, right? So these are some things you might hear or observe about somebody that has a growth mindset with something. I want to learn. Criticism never feels good. So we're never going to say, please give me all the criticism, right? But you can at least say, okay, that didn't feel great, but what can I learn? How do I get better? What is somebody teaching me, right? I'm going to find lessons in how, well, that person was successful. How are they successful? Let me see if they have any lessons or critiques or feedback that they want to give me to help me be successful. They add that yet, right? There's a big power of yet. If you say, I can't do it, you're never going to do it. But if you say, I can't do it yet, that gives you that potential. And they can be comfortable making mistakes. Again, not always fun to make mistakes, but we can be comfortable and safe doing it, and learn from them. And so on the next slide, again, this is where they feel like they can embrace challenges. They might be nervous, they might be scared, but they're going to say, I'm going to try it. I'm going to persevere, right? There's something in my way. Let me figure out how to remove this obstacle, right? I control my effort. If I can control how much effort I put in, then I can control how successful I am, right? I might make mistakes. There's going to be things along the way that are hard, but I know I'm going to continue to learn and be as successful as I can be. And they often like to see that people are successful. And you don't have to take our words for it. Science backs this up as well. So there's a lot of, and then there's a video. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to play this little bit clip of a video to talk about the science behind the growth mindset.
This work shows that mindsets have a major influence on people's ability to learn, and that people who utilize this growth mindset tend to learn, grow, and achieve more over time than people with a fixed. Growth mindset really creates a solid foundation for great learning. And because of its power, companies, sports teams, and schools from all over the world are implementing this into their culture.
All right.
So as you, oh, go ahead.
Research shows that mindsets have a major.
I I was just going to say that as you can see that there is science, not only is there science to show that we do have neuroplasticity so that our brains can change and learn and grow, but that when you do have a mindset or a positive or growth mindset, then you can be more successful than somebody who has a fixed mindset.
And I think what that gets back to is that although we teach this to our kids and we want our kids to develop this, it's true for adults too. And that can be hard to remember because chances are we've had lots of experiences that have led to fixed mindsets in our own lives in different areas. And so some of the key concepts that we want to make sure that all of you, but families and teachers and students alike are sharing is this idea that learning and stretching are actually what make us smart, quote unquote smart. It's not getting things done faster. It's not being at the top. It's that learning and growing along the way, because it's unrealistic to never make mistakes. You know, we have to make mistakes in order to find out what doesn't work. And so related to that is this idea that we have to know what to do. It isn't enough just to keep trying and doing the same thing again and again. We have to think about those strategies, and we have to pair those strategies with effort or hard work. We like to say that effort is the fuel that grows our brains, because it isn't simple, if you think back to that infographic that Chelsea described, to go from that place down at the bottom of not knowing something to knowing something. That's not a simple path. It actually takes hard work, and we want students, we want ourselves to understand that, because if we don't recognize the effort that goes into it, it can start to feel really overwhelming. And we put in a little bit of effort, we don't see growth right away. It's easy to shy away from that. We have to know that we're pushing through those obstacles, challenges, frustration, and using new strategies along the way. We also need to take risks. There are some great, we're not showing it today, but there's a great TED Talk on the importance of taking risks and how that actually helps our brains kind of see things in a new way. And so in order to grow, in order to see things in a new way, we have to take those risks. Chelsea mentioned already the power of yet, and I think this is one of the most powerful statements that we can use, because it really turns all of those negative situations and statements into a positive. If you just recognize that you're not there yet, it opens up a world of possibility, because now our potential is all before us. We're just not there yet, and it's going to take some time, but we have that kind of open door to keep trying. And this is huge. We'll talk a little bit more about mistakes on the next couple of slides, but really reframing the idea of mistakes from something that's a bad thing, something to be avoided, to an opportunity, a chance for learning. So we like to say that mistake is just another word for learning, because anytime you make a mistake, you're giving yourself that chance to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. So Sarah and Chelsea, I wanted to add one thing also, is that as you guys have mentioned, we have fixed and growth mindsets, not necessarily as a human, but as sometimes in a particular situation. So sometimes we may have a fixed mindset about this part of math and not all of math, or just our ability to write a paper or ability to get started on something, and we may shy away. So it's not necessarily that we have fixed or growth mindsets about anything. And I think the other thing that's so important to note, interject at this time, is that school is a place, and we're about to kind of enter into this part of the presentation, but school is a place where, as you saw with the know and don't know, and as Chelsea explained, every single subject, and Sarah said this too, every single subject, every single year, you're constantly being thrown things you don't know. And if we view mistakes as bad things, then, we all know from the points of being athletes, right? You have to miss 10 to make one shot, right? You have a 0.3 average, it's great in baseball. We know that part of the journey is, by definition, the mistakes. So if you're practicing your addition and you don't make mistakes, you're not going to master it. And then you don't move on to your subtraction if you're practicing your subtraction. And so one of the things that I'd like for everybody to keep in mind as we move over to the next slides are that, when our kids first learn to walk, and they fell down, what did we do? We clapped for them, right? We laughed at them. Oh, get up, get up, get up. And we didn't look at that as a mistake. We looked at it as part of the journey. And so that's really what we're trying to say here, which I think is really important.
And to that point, one thing that research has found is that we tend kind of as people to want to be our best. We want to be in our performance zone. This is the area where we're thinking about our goal is to do our best. And of course, there are times when we really do want to do our best, when we want to focus on execution and doing things perfectly. Realistically, we know that we're still going to make mistakes, even in that championship game, even on a test, a big test, it's possible we can make mistakes, but our goal is to show that we have it mastered, that we've got it. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is we can get really stuck in that performance zone, and we view every situation as I've got to do the best I can. And what happens when we get stuck in that performance zone is that we close ourselves off from being willing to take those risks and try things and focus on improvement. So the learning zone is the mindset or the time when we're really focusing on improving. And often the learning zone is when we're working on what we call deliberate practice. So not necessarily trying to get better at everything all at once, but maybe focusing on a specific area. So in math, you might be working on multiplication, but you're specifically working on knowing your eights facts. I teach 4th and 5th grade, so that's a big area where we're working on. And so we play lots of different games and we try and make it fun to keep kids in that learning zone so that they're not feeling like, they have to get it right every time. It becomes fun. We're taking risks. We're practicing. We recognize that we haven't gotten it yet, and that's okay. And so what we found, or what research has found, is that you have to be deliberate about going back and forth between this learning zone and this performance zone, because we don't want to get stuck in either one. If we never try and do our best, we're not going to see our potential and we're not going to be able to analyze and learn from the things we haven't done yet. But if we stay in that performance zone all the time, we're also not going to be able to really grow and improve because we're never giving ourselves that freedom to step back. We've already made some examples. We've already connected to some examples from athletes. And I think this is another great connection here because, athletes spend a lot of time practicing. They do scrimmages, they do different types of practice trials. They're not always in a game, and that's intentional. If they were always trying to play the game, they would never have the time to practice free throws or, all of those smaller things that build up to a really successful game. And we have another quick clip from a TED Talk, although this one I strongly recommend that you search for yourself after. The whole thing is really great. We're just going to show a little bit.
Thanks, Sarah.
But doing deliberate practice. And fourth, we must be in a low-stakes situation. Because if mistakes are to be expected, then the consequence of making them must not be catastrophic or even very significant. A tightrope walker doesn't practice new tricks without a net underneath, and an athlete wouldn't set out to first try a new move during a championship match. One reason that in our lives, we spend so much time in the performance zone is that our environments often are unnecessarily high stakes. We create social risks for one another, even in schools which are supposed to be all about learning, and I'm not talking about standardized tests. I mean that every minute of every day, many students in elementary school through colleges feel that if they make a mistake, others will think less of them. No wonder they're always stressed out and not taking the risks necessary for learning. But they learn that mistakes are undesirable inadvertently when teachers or parents are eager to hear just correct answers and reject mistakes rather than welcome and examine them to learn from them, or when we look for narrow responses rather than encourage more exploratory thinking that we can all learn from. When all homework or student work has a number or a letter on it and counts toward a final grade, rather than being used for practice, mistakes, feedback, and revision, we send the message that school is a performance zone.
And I'll just mention before I turn it back over that, I think the title of this webinar is really about how we can help our kids leverage the power of growth mindset. And one of the ways is for us to kind of take stock at, as parents, what happens when our kids come home and they don't have the tests score that we want, or, when we're asking a group of kids a question and we want, only to hear the right answer. So it's really just an opportunity to really self-assess and say, if we're always looking for the right answers from our children, then how are they going to feel about making mistakes? What if we could say, oh, wow, you know what? It is so brave that you tried. I'm so glad that you tried, because there's a lot of kids out there that really do struggle with just trying, just raising their own hands, or being afraid that their question is stupid, and that really stunts the learning process. And so that's what I think we've been trying to say up to this point. And certainly what Eduardo said just so beautifully.
I think the other piece of that is we have to be willing to celebrate those smaller milestones along the way. So, your kid may come home and not have gotten the test score that you wanted, but they got one problem right that they had really been struggling with, or they remembered one fact that they hadn't been able to remember, and being able to hone in on that and recognize that is so critical. Chelsea mentioned this a little bit earlier when she was talking about kind of what our kids come away with when they have a fixed mindset. And obviously we want to help parents be able to build up this growth mindset in our kids. And sometimes the things that we do accidentally or inadvertently lead to this fixed mindset. And one of those things is praising smart. Being able, and this comes out of our mouths so often, even as teachers, we see our kids do something great and we want to praise them. And so, we go right to, oh, you're so smart, you're so talented. But what we found is that when you do that, when you tell a child, you're so smart, you're so talented, that becomes kind of the way that they see themselves, and they hold on to that. And anything that goes against that view of them, they don't want to show. They don't want to take risks because it might show that they're not as talented or they're not as smart. And now you've kind of made that their ultimate goal, the way that they see themselves. When in fact, really, I think all of us, we want our kids to continue to grow. We want them to have lots of opportunities. We want them to persevere. And so by praising those things, praising their effort, you raised your hand, by praising their strategies, you asked a question, by praising their perseverance, and by praising the choices that they're making, that's what actually leads to the growth mindset. And this is a process. It takes time. Like we said already, it's not that we typically have a growth mindset about everything or a fixed mindset about everything. You may actually find that your kid has a fixed mindset just about a couple of things. And so if they have in general a growth mindset, that's an opportunity to say, look at how you approach playing soccer. You are always getting out there and trying new things and spending time doing that. Let's see if we can apply that to how you're looking at math. Let's see if we can break it down and think about what those small skills are that you can practice in the same way. And by turning around the things that we praise kids for, saying, great struggle, you must have learned a lot. Tell me more about the choice you made. We're actually helping them identify the things that are transferable from one skill to another, from one subject to another. And that is the way that they're going to be able to hold on to that growth mindset, is that as they get older and face new challenges, because we know as we keep learning that there's always going to be something we don't know. There's always a don't know on the horizon, even when we feel like we've mastered a whole lot.
I just want to emphasize, I think that's an incredible point, because one thing that we always say is that learning is a skill and skills are built, not born. And that's actually the cover of our study skills course, because learning and the circle that you saw that went around all those classes, English, math, everything, learning is in itself a skill, right? Because that's what we take out of college. When we graduate, we take that out with us. So how do we plan things? How do we organize? How do we, break things down? How do we initiate? Those are the things that we want kids to learn to do. So I think Sarah's point here about, we really want them to learn how to learn is key, because that's what they're going to take to their first job. That's what they're going to take to their family and their family planning, in terms of going on vacations and making choices and helping out their kids. So I think that's a really excellent point.
And here's where I'll say this can be challenging, because as much as our kids are listening to what we're praising about them, they're also listening and looking to what we're saying about ourselves. And so this slide, we're thinking about not just how do we change our kids' mindsets by changing their words, but also how do we change our own mindsets and our own words. So I always think about, if we come home from taking a Pilates class and say like, that was terrible, I'm no good at that, I'm never going back. Our kids are watching that. They're seeing how we do that. If we try a new recipe and say, tell you what, I can't cook, never been able to cook, never going to be able to cook, they're seeing that as well. And so we can actually start to change our mindsets by changing the words that we use. Instead of just saying, I'm not good at this, add that really powerful yet. I'm not good at this yet. Instead of just saying, I'm only going to do the things that I'm good at, I'm already really confident about this, I'm going to stick with it. Try and model for your kids. Be really specific. I like to do things that are new, even if they're hard. I like to try new things. I like to try new skills and learn more, even though I know it's not going to be easy, even when I know it's going to be difficult. And even being open about the mistakes that we make. I think it's so powerful as a teacher to model for our kids. I make mistakes all the time. And instead of trying to hide that from our kids, being really clear, mistakes help me learn. Every time I make a mistake, I have an opportunity to learn from that, because our instinct is to be afraid of those mistakes. And when we cultivate that, that's when we start to see that fixed mindsets come around and kids shying away from obstacles and not wanting to take risks. So these are some really, I say simple, they're not really simple. It takes a lot of practice, but some simple tweaks that we can make to our language that can start to change our own mindsets, and then model for our kids how to change their mindsets too. And then Chelsea's going to go a little bit more into how we really build up a growth mindset.
Yeah, so we want you to have like a couple takeaways, of course, that, where you can have some actionable things that you can do. And a lot of those are what Sarah just said. One of the simplest things you can do is model for yourself and for your kids that language that you can turn to yourself and your kids. So even earlier today, for the 100th time, one of my twin 4-year-olds knocked down my water cup. I was like, do you have, a magnet on your foot that just every time? And I wanted to be like, had to take that deep breath. And we had to dissect, okay, what do we do now? How can we stop this in the future? Should mommy have had her cup on the floor? No, right? So I had to admit my own mistake, and then we had to kind of dissect through it. Now, I don't do that all the time, so I just want to put that out there. But it's something that we can work at, right? And so part of it is, again, helping kids how they can understand that abilities can be developed. And part of that is being able to dissect some of those mistakes, and really thinking about, okay, you made the mistake, but like what else was good in there? Or this is what not to do next time. Right now we've learned what not to do. So now we have some other things to learn to do. Again, you think back that, at Debbie's point, you just visualize when your child was learning to walk, right? And you were so happy, and your child made those first stumbling steps and they fell on their bottoms, as they inevitably were going to do, right? And you didn't say, man, you fell down again, I can't even believe that. Could you just learn to walk already? Right? That seems ludicrous that we would say that, right? No, we clapped and we were happy, and we said, you're going to get it next time. And we said, oh, you just took 4 steps. Last time you took 3. We say all those things. And for some reason, as they grow up, we forget to use that language with them. But you already know how to use it, right? So it's just kind of thinking back to when I knew that they didn't know anything versus I am assuming that they know things, right? Let's just assume that they don't. And let me use that teachable language with them to help them build up how they can use their critical thinking skills for their own selves. Another point is, we've said it before, really helping kids to understand that the mistakes aren't scary, right? Giving them the opportunity to think about how they can take all those learning opportunities that they have and be more successful, right? Because, if somebody has, Johnny says, man, I can never do math. Susie's just so good at it. She's just so smart, right? If you hear that, one thing that you could say is, I think that you're both probably really smart. Maybe Susie's really good at math. What are you good at? Oh, you're good at writing? Well, what do you do when you write? What are the skills that you use? Let's see if we can apply those to math, right? The same thing that Sarah was saying with, taking something that you're really good at, showing them that there are some things that they're putting effort in and they're doing it because it's enjoyable, right? Which we can put effort into things that aren't necessarily as easy or enjoyable. It's not as easy, but you can do it. A couple takeaways on the next slide. Are that we want to help kids learn that asking for help is not weakness. For some reason, that particular vulnerability for us in our society, it's pervasive. Kids learn it at a young age. We have a hard time with it as adults, that if you ask for help, clearly you are weak, right? And we want to dispel that because nobody got anywhere without some help. We've all made mistakes. We've all had to get help from people on our way, right? And it's important for kids to know that. Now, it can be too, sometimes my kids will come to me and say, Mommy, can you help me? And I'll say, what have you tried first, right? I may ask them, what are some strategies that you can use before coming to me? And I'm sure Sarah does this in the classroom. I do it as well for some of my kids who come to me, right? But it's still showing them that asking for help is okay because now I'm reminding you. These are some things we've talked about. This might be something you've never thought of before. I want to show you that you can be a problem solver and critical thinker. Right? So asking for help still was successful for them, even if I'm not helping them the way that they thought I was going to help them, right? And the last one, we want kids to enjoy learning, the learning and the doing, not just the winning, not just the test score, not just the goal, right? We don't want people to say, well, I'm a nobody right now, and I really need to make it to be a somebody, right? The growth mindset part is I'm already a somebody and I just am going to continue to work on my self-development and motivation skills and be the best that I can be. Not maybe the best ever. I mean, that could be your goal if you're Michael Phelps, right? But every other athlete still enjoys their sport. Every other musician still enjoys doing what they do, right? And so it's more finding the enjoyment in the doing part and the making mistakes and the having fun with friends while you're doing it and the learning, right? Than just that ultimate goal of winning. Because the other thing too is if you're not enjoying the winning and the learning and the getting places, once you hit that goal, then you're not sure where else to go. Once you get that A on a test or you do this and then what's your next goal? Right? And so if you can just be excited about the winning part, that's great, cool, but be more passionate about the doing and the learning, right? You're going to be happier and feel more successful. And the other thing too is, Sarah said this earlier as we were talking about in the presentation, about thinking about what are some things that you're good at. Let's practice those. But then how about we think about something we've never done before? Or maybe we're not good at, but we really enjoy doing, like art. A lot of kids really love doing art until a certain age when it becomes about the performance. When now art is in the performance zone and not in the learning zone anymore for whatever reason. And they stop doing art even if it was something that they like doing, but now they feel like they're not good enough, right? We want to keep kids in their enjoyment zone. Versus just feeling like I have to win at everything. I have to be perfect and good at everything. And if I'm not, then now I'm going to stop trying. That's what we want to prevent.
And I just want to add one thing to what Chelsea said. I think something that's so important when we when we find our kids, you know, looking at that one kid who's so smart, or, you know, looking at that athlete who's the best at it, is pointing out all the effort that's behind the scenes, because nobody who's successful has ever gotten there by not making mistakes and not putting in work. It just may not be that that's what makes headlines. That may not be what comes out in the classroom, but helping kids see all of those things that go into being successful can help them kind of dispel that myth that someone's just naturally good at something, when they realize, oh, no, they're putting in lots and lots of hours of studying and reading and practicing, that you may not see all the time, but it's happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and one of the things that we do in the class that is, I think, important, and you guys can do at home as well, is helping to remind the kids of how they got to where they are, even with riding their bike, even with swimming. You know, my daughter has been scared really or apprehensive of doing a lot of those things. And when she first went to swim, she was so nervous about getting in the water that during her swimming lesson, she just refused to go in. And, you know, while it was frustrating, she did sit on the side of the pool, and she sat there for the entire time. And so what I said to her afterwards, even though I really wanted to say, I can't believe you didn't go in, but that would not have been my mom award. What I said to her was, well, I'm so proud of you that you stuck there, you stuck in it the whole time, and you stayed by the side of the pool. And you know what? Eventually she did go in. And getting on that, you know, when she was, you know, 11 years old and still didn't know how to ride her bike, you know, when people would ask, do you know how to ride a bike? And if she would say no, imagine that feeling of shame. But often I would say, well, not yet. And there's a big difference for that. I think you will probably hear that too. There's a big difference. And so I think it's, you know, a nice summary of everything we just said, and just that, you know, these are ways that we can really help our kids to model for our kids what a growth mindset is, and reminding them that you didn't get great at swimming just by overnight. You took little by little. First you had to feel comfortable with your head underwater, then you had to feel comfortable, you know, learning the strokes, and you had to take it one step at a time. So, you know, you got good enough till you can enjoy it, which is really what Chelsea was saying and Sarah was saying, the effort behind it. Chelsea, did you want to say one thing before?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, we talked a lot about like natural abilities and talent, and I also want to talk about the, you know, other end of the spectrum, where you may have a child with a true disability, you know, dyslexia, ADHD. There's a host of other disabilities that your child could have. And we want to honor that, right? Because those are true challenges. What we want to help with is that we can teach your child, no matter what their challenge is, that it can be challenging and it can be difficult, but we can develop strategies to help you be as successful as you can be. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be your favorite thing. It doesn't mean you're going to be the best that there ever was, although you could be, right? The goal is to show students that no matter what their challenge is, because everybody has challenges, whether it's diagnosed or not, right? That they can develop strategies for themselves, and again, control their effort. I can control the work that I put in to be as successful as I want to be or can be. I can reach my full potential, instead of just saying, well, I have this disability, so I mean, there's really nothing I can do, right? There's nothing in the book that says that, right? And so I wanted to acknowledge and honor that there is another side of the spectrum, but it's still the same work as anybody else. And I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to close with a few words from the people that matter the most, which is our kids, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
But I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this because, well, I don't really have any other choice. It's not like I can go to ELA instead of math. But also because it's just like, you know, it's like, I want to do this because since it's so hard, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be like, Brain, you cannot. And just like run away from this. I'm going to do this.
I do gymnastics, like about 3 hours a week, and like there have been a lot of skills where I never thought I could get them, and I was like, well, I'll just kind of stand back because I don't want to hurt myself. But with the right amount of training, I got them really quickly, and they just didn't seem scary or bad to me anymore. And I think that's kind of like the same with the brain, and that you shouldn't be scared to try new things that might be a little bit harder, because eventually you'll just rise up to that level, and if you stay down, you're never going to get to that place.
I agree with Kate. Don't compare yourself to others. Everyone is different. Everyone will learn in a way, but they could learn slow or really fast. Even though you take a while to learn it, you'll succeed in it.
And actually the video actually cuts off there, so I'm sorry there's a little bit. I think she was saying you'll learn and succeed. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and go ahead and see if we have any questions on how we can help build a growth mindset.
All right, I'll get them.
Is anybody have any particular questions?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. My I have two, probably three boys who are twice exceptional. Hello. I don't know.
You know what I'll do? I'm gonna Sophia, I'll mute everybody and then you can unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Okay, you can unmute yourself.
Next person while I'm figuring this out.
That's
I don't
okay.
see.
I got you. No, I got
you.
Are you there?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I have 3 sons, and 14, 11, and 5. And the older two are on the, are 2E, you know, the sort of gifted and with learning challenges. And I, as a child, went through this. I also fit that profile. At least they know kind of what can be making things difficult. And we focus on how everyone has strengths and challenges, but there are times it's really hard for me to get past this sense of I don't want to try, or I didn't do it right, or whatever. I mean, for my 5-year-old who's sitting next to me, I color outside the lines with him, and you know, like they all run a little anxious, but like it's really hard. I've been using a lot of this kind of talk for many years now, and you know, and telling the grandparents, don't say they're smart, say, you know, praise the effort, praise sort of, but this persistence thing, it's challenging, and doing things that are outside of the comfort zone, because some things are so easy. It's really hard to get them to stretch. Please feel free to mute me now.
Debbie, do you want to move to the next slide, actually, and maybe I can use that as kind of an answer? You know, I think this is...
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forgot about that one. Perfect.
Well, I think this is so true, because, I mean, the truth is it's hard for us as adults too. You know, we find it hard to try things that are new. So I love this visual because I think it really shows that there is this path from like, I won't do it. And even just moving from I won't to I can't is a step in the right direction. And so, you know, this is something that I've used with my students in the past to say, you know, yesterday you wouldn't even come to the carpet. So today, you know, at least you were on the carpet. And then we can kind of move through that. So, you know, I don't want to make it sound like it's a simple thing, because it's not. It is really challenging. But I think one part of that is being able to really hone in on those small steps along the way, because otherwise it does feel like just a huge leap to go from, you know, if you're trying to go from I want to do it to I did it, there's like 7 steps along that path. And really from I want to do it to how do I do it, even there, you know, there's actually a bunch of smaller steps in the middle of, you know, what strategies am I going to use? How am I going to keep track of what I've done and know what to do next? So I would say as much as possible, break things down, you know, break it down into very small, manageable steps so that you can see that, you know, okay, you were going to do one thing and you did that one thing. And now let's think about one more thing so that those things, you know, that you want to do don't feel quite so big.
Yeah, and I'll say something else too. Thank you, Zolfa. I'm glad you like the graphic. I think the other thing is, I think that's exceptionally helpful, Sarah. And I love this graphic too. And one thing on the graphic is that we also talk about very much in the class is that this idea that, you know, sometimes what happens is kids get to this stage where they go, you know what, I want to do it, but then they get stuck and they fall back down to the bottom again. And so we have to recognize that it's not like they just keep going up. I mean, they do go up and down and up and down, and it is hard. And I know that during, I'm pretty much an open book, and I know that during the whole distance learning, my daughter just really was challenged with getting all of her work done on time. And, you know, I will say that as frustrating as it was for me, there's the small piece of appraising her. Well, you know what? I really like how you persevere and did get your work done. It might not have been on time, but you did you worked hard and you eventually got it all done. But sometimes we have to think in the big picture also, you know what? My expectations and dreams for her, which is that she would be one of those kids that just is organized and gets her work done and, you know, just powers through and puts in the effort and tries different strategies. Those hopes and dreams are things that maybe she's just not there yet. And maybe in her 6th grade year, that's just not going to happen. And I raised one that was very, very difficult, but is 21 years old this July, and has just, the brain maturity has come to, you know, where he's slowly starting to see much more of a growth mindset because all those seeds have been planted. And one of the things that we love the most here was a Dr. Dalton, who's a really well-known psychologist, who says, water the seeds, not the weeds. And how do we find as parents the way to water those seeds and try to ignore the weeds? And it's really extraordinarily hard, especially when we're all stressed and our own fears for them come to the surface. But I think it is the kind of thing that, you know, I keep in my mind all the time and trying to understand what the need is behind their behavior. So if they're not going to do it, what's going on underneath that? So hopefully that's helpful.
The other thing too is, you know, it was funny. I was teaching in my school job before COVID. I was teaching executive function skills, whole group to some 5th graders, and I was explaining to them that their brains don't fully mature until they're like 20. That executive functioning part of their brain doesn't fully mature. And so they said, well, then why are you teaching us? That just means that we don't have to do it. And I said, great question, because, or great, you know, introduction, because the point is, if we teach you these skills now, if we use this language now, then that's what they're going to hear, even if it hasn't clicked yet. Because if we wait until it clicks, it's already too late for our brains to build that blueprint. We want to do as much kind of teaching and supporting and reinforcing, even if it doesn't feel like it's working yet, because eventually they're going to get to a place. Again, it might be small, it might not be the place you expected, but they will get to a place where it feels like, oh, they are, you know, using some of these strategies and skills. You know, wow, that's something I said. They just said that naturally, right? It does feel frustrating because it does take time. And sometimes it feels like, you know, we're watering the seeds as much as we possibly can, but how much more water do you need, right? It feels like that, and that's okay. And I think that's okay to identify in ourselves too, and understand too, why are we having a fixed mindset about this, right? Which is not negative, right? It's just saying to ourselves, what is it for me? Is it that fear that they're not going to succeed? Is it that fear that they're, you know, going to be this way forever? Let's acknowledge that. And then we can kind of see for ourselves, what do I need to do to help continue to support who I need to support? But again, it's part of that thing, like, we're going to do as much teaching as we can, and they may not be getting it yet, but eventually they will. And that's why we do so much encouraging and reinforcing now.
And that's a perfect segue to, it looks like we have just 2 more minutes. The thing that we wanted to share is that we do offer a course for rising 4th and 5th graders around growth mindset and study skills. We really do try to help prepare them for middle school. And the first section of the course, the first 2 hours, which is the first session, is with parents as well. So everything, not this exact presentation that we give, but we do talk a lot about growth mindset and help students experience what it's like to, you know, where they have have exhibited a growth mindset. And then we do work a lot on how you can infuse the growth mindset into the types of skills they need to be prepared for middle school, like managing time, work, attention, etc. And we practice the skills as well while we're in the course. We also have, as I said earlier, 6th through 8th and 9th through 12th study skills course. So if the courses work for you, they're all remote this summer, as well as the writing, etc. And so we invite you to check out the website. And if not, we certainly are happy that you joined us for this. And we're going to try to continue to do all of these types of enrichment webinars throughout the summer as much as people will join us. And we want to thank you for your attention and for being here. And thank you, Sarah and Chelsea, for sharing all of your great knowledge and experience. And thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and send out the recording to everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.